peered over the railing. Jack looked too. They saw Lucy and William's little lifeboat creaking down toward the Atlantic Ocean. It reached the glassy black water, and then it floated off into the darkness. Annie waved. "Bye, William. Bye, Lucy," she shouted. "Thank you for your gift." She held up the watch that hung from her neck, and then she and Jack looked at it. The time was 2:05. "Only 15 minutes left," said Annie. "We have to get back to the treehouse now. Let's climb the stairs to the smokestacks." Suddenly, the front of the ship dipped down into the sea, and deck chairs started to slide past Jack and Annie. The band played a slow, calm song, and it sounded like a church hymn. But the crowd started to panic, and people pushed and shouted, trying to get to a safer part of the ship. "It's every man for himself," the captain shouted to all of his crew. The men all stopped what they were doing and ran up the deck. Jack and Annie ran too, and they dodged the sliding tables and chairs. They reached the stairs that led to the smokestacks, and they grabbed the railing and pulled themselves up the steps. The ship tilted farther. "Get these smokestacks," Jack cried. "Or get to those smokestacks," he cried. They slipped and crawled down the deck, but when they got to the smokestacks, Jack and Annie looked around wildly. The magic treehouse was now gone. Chapter 9. Time Stops. "Where's it out?" shouted Annie. The front of the Titanic sank deeper into the sea, and Jack and Annie fell forward. They grabbed the railing and held on for their lives. "Maybe the treehouse fell into the ocean," shouted Jack. A great roar started coming from the ship. Jack imagined everything crashing forward, all the furniture, dishes, bicycles, the grand clock on the staircase, and he looked down. A giant wave of water rolled over the lower deck. Jack imagined water flooding the third-class corridor, the card room, and the grand staircase. He closed his eyes and waited to be washed away. "Arf, arf!" The barking came from a distance. "Oh, Teddy!" cried Annie. Jack had forgotten all about the little dog. Holding onto the railing, he used one hand to pull off his knapsack. Teddy wasn't there. There was more frantic barking. "Where's Teddy?" Jack cried. "He's calling us!" shouted Annie. Here they are, just hanging on. "We can't look for him," shouted Jack. "We'll fall off the ship." Teddy barked and barked, and "He's close by," said Annie. She held onto the railing and moved slowly down the steep deck. "Annie!" cried Jack. Suddenly the lights on the Titanic went out, and the world was pitch dark. Jack couldn't see Annie at all. "Annie!" he shouted. He tried to move down the deck too, but the ship tilted again. Jack slipped and fell. He rolled until he crashed into a smokestack. "Jack!" cried Annie. "Here! Teddy kept barking. The back of the Titanic was rising out of the ocean, and the front of the ship was going down. Jack tried to go around the smokestack without falling. In the dark, he could barely see the treehouse. It was stuck between a smokestack and a railing, and it was lying on its side. Annie and Teddy were looking out the window. "Teddy's barking led me here," Annie cried. "Hurry, Jack!" Jack crawled around the smokestack. He held out his hand, and Annie grabbed it. She pulled him into the treehouse, and Teddy licked his face. "I wish we could go home," Annie shouted, pointing at the Pennsylvania book. Jack heard a loud crack. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, and then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10, Touch of Magic. "Oh, man," whispered Jack. He was lying on the floor of the treehouse. He was wearing his pajamas and his rain poncho again. "Are you okay?" Annie asked him. "Yeah, how about you?" said Jack. "My heart's beating really fast," said Annie. "Mine too," said Jack. He thought of the Titanic sinking into the cold black sea, and his eyes started to fill with tears. "It was terrible," he said. Annie nodded. Jack could see tears on her cheeks. Teddy licked Jack's face. "Hey, how did you get out of my knapsack?" said Jack. Teddy whined and Jack and Annie stroked his furry head and ears. I think he has a touch of magic, said Annie. Slowly, Jack sat up. He saved our lives, he said. And now we have the first gift to break the spell he's under, said Annie. She turned on her flashlight and she shined it on the silver pocket watch that hung from her neck. Lucy's gift, she said. The watch had stopped and the hands were at 2:20. Jack was silent and then he sighed. That's exactly when the ship went down, he said. Annie looked at him. I guess that's when time stopped for the Titanic, she said. Jack nodded his head and Annie put the pocket watch on top of Morgan's note. A gift from a ship lost at sea, she said softly. They were both quiet. Then Jack took off his glasses and wiped the tears from his eyes. Annie stood up and she took a deep breath. I'm ready to go, she said. Let's put Teddy in your backpack and take him home with us. She shined her flashlight around the treehouse. Teddy, she said. There was no sign of the little dog. He's not here, said Annie. What are you talking about, said Jack. We were just petting him. He's up to his magic tricks again, said Annie. She sighed. We'll have to go home without him. But what happened to him, said Jack. I don't know, said Annie, but I have a feeling that we'll see him again soon. She started down the rope ladder and Jack looked around the treehouse one last time. Teddy, he said. But the treehouse was quiet. Jack pulled on his backpack and climbed down the rope ladder, and Annie was waiting for him. Without a word, Jack took her hand. The rain had stopped, but the water still dripped from the trees. Stars glittered overhead in a clear sky. Silently, Jack and Annie left the Frog Creek woods. They walked up the dark street to their house and climbed the steps to their porch. Before they went inside, they looked out at the night again. Time might have stopped for the Titanic, said Jack, but books and memories keep the Titanic alive, don't they? It's a true story, but it's also like a myth now. Yeah, said Annie, and every time the story's told, we wish it had a different ending. Jack nodded his head. That was exactly how he felt. Staring at the starry sky, he shuddered at the memory of the sinking ship. He knew that he and Annie were lucky. They had come home. Good night, Titanic, he said softly. Goodbye. Then he and Annie slipped quietly into their house, where it was cozy and dry and very safe. The end. We will start book number 18 on Monday. So you guys have a good weekend, and I hope you enjoyed tonight on the Titanic. Bye.